How's everybody doing today? Today we are going to cover Excel if statements. If statements are great because they allow you to have two different values in the same cell, and the correct value is going to be chosen based on a logical condition. So what we've got, our first one we're going to do, we have a scenario where I've got level 1 employees make $10 an hour, level 2 employees make $12 an hour. So I'm going to create an if statement that will work for all these employees with one statement. So I'm going to start out, I've got equal sign if. I put in my parenthesis, my opening parenthesis. You always have to start with a logical test. Notice my autocomplete is trying to help me out here. The logical test is, what do you have to look at to determine their rate? Well, they're either level 1 or they're level 2. So the cell that I have to look at is cell C3. So I'm going to say if C3 equals 1, well, if that's a true statement, what I want is I want their rate to be 10. So if C3 equals 1, that's my logical test. I hit a comma. The comma is the way you separate your logical test from your value of true from your value of false. So if C3 equals 1, my logical test, comma, my value of true is going to be 10. My value of false, meaning if that statement, C3 equals 1, is not a true statement, then I know they have a rate of 12. So there's my entire if statement. Always has three parts: a logical test, a value that you want to use when that logical test is true, and an alternate value that you want to use when that logical test is false. I hit enter and I notice it does work. The other thing that I always do before I copy it down is I test it. I say, well, it works if the person has a level 1. What if I change their level to 2? And it does. It changes to 12. If I change it back to 1, it changes back to 10. So I can say, okay, this if statement is working. The great thing about this if statement is I can just copy it down. And it works for everybody. All my level 2 peoples get 12, all my level 1 peoples get 10. If I change any of these, my cells update to reflect the new rate. So it works for everybody. Some people have the wrong impression that you need to do a different if statement for all your cells. For example, they'll start up, they'll see this is level 1, so they'll say, okay, if C3 equals 1, comma 10, comma 12, and then they'll go to the next cell and they'll say, oh, this is level 2, so if C4 equals 2, what do I want to happen? I want a 12 here and a 10 here. And that actually works, but it's a horrible way to do it. You don't need to do that. If you do that, it means you're going to have to type in an if statement for each cell. Bottom line is you can start out with C3 equals 1 and follow it up with the true statement 10 and the false statement 12. Or you can start out with a 2 and follow it up that way. But what I recommend is always find one if statement that works, test it, and then copy it down. That's the best way to do it. The next thing I have to do is figure out gross pay. Gross pay in this case is going to be pretty straightforward. It's just going to be my hours times my rate. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in there. If I type my hours times my rate, I've got B3 times D3. In this case I get 420. I can copy down. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at an if statement that will calculate union dues. Now, union dues are based on whether the fact that you're a union member or not. If you're a union member, you pay $22. If you're not a union member, you don't pay anything. So again, we go up here and we start with our if statement, equal sign if, parenthesis. Now, my logical test in this case, you always have to think, how do I know if they're a union member or not? Well, I need to look at cell F3. So I can say if F3 equals Y. Now, in this case, you notice I did use quotes. So that's a tiny bit different. If we're using numeric values, you do not have to use quotes. but if you're using text, you do have to use quotes. So I'm saying if F3 equals Y, comma, well, if that's true, I know they pay $22, comma. If that's false, they pay 0. I close my parenthesis. I test it out. It works here. Can I change it to a no? I change it to an N. Does it work? It worked. So I copy it down. I say, okay, it looks like it worked for everybody. That's always the bottom line. Can you copy this thing down and then go and change any of these others over here and have your formula update itself? If you can do that, then it worked. Next thing we're going to figure out here is federal tax. Now, I know this isn't really how they figure out federal tax, but in our little scenario, this is what we're going to say. We're going to say if you make over $300, your federal tax is 15% of your gross pay. If you make less than $300, your federal tax is 12% of your gross pay. So, again, I go up here, I look, here's my if statement, equal sign if, got my parenthesis, my logical test. What do I have to look at to determine whether I pay 15% or 12%? I've got to look at gross pay. So gross pay is in cell E3. So I say if E3 less than 300, well, if E3 is less than 300, what do I know? I gotta pay 12%. Now, one mistake people make a lot of times is they won't take 12% of gross pay. They'll just put in the 12% and then they'll put in a comma and then they'll put in the 15%. Although this is pretty close, it's not exactly what you want. If I copy it down, I do see that it works. I don't have anybody under 300, so let me put somebody that's under 300, verify that that works. I can have 290 over here, verify that that works. So it is working, but I'm really not paying 15 cents or 12 cents. What I really want to say is 12% of my gross pay. So I need to multiply that by gross pay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my formula a little. I'm going to put 12% times, well, where's my gross pay? It's in, all right, it's in cell E3. And then I have to have 15% times E3. And then I copy that down. That's really what I wanted. So again, I can put in the if statement, one if statement, I can copy it down. It works for everybody. And if I change this, now if I say, oh, this person made 348, I notice now it's using the 15% times my gross pay. Anyhow, hopefully this was helpful to you. These are 3 different examples. We have some examples in your homework that you're going to need to try, which are going to be different than these. The thing to remember, though, in every if statement you do, there are 3 parts. There's a condition, or a logical test. There's a value that you want to use if that condition is true, and there's an alternate value that you want to use if that condition is false. Every single one of these followed the same pattern. For the union dues, it's a condition, F3 equals Y. It's a value that I want to use if that condition is true, and it's an alternate value that I want to use if that condition is false. Even if we look at federal tax, here's my condition, comma, value that I want to use if it's true, comma, value that I want to use if it's false. So when you start to build these if statements for homework, even though they're going to be different, what I recommend is think of the three parts and just try to do each part separately. Say to yourself, okay, what is the condition? What cell do I have to look at to determine what the correct value is? And then you just follow it up with, okay, what's the correct value if this condition is true? What's the correct value if this condition is false? We're definitely getting into some of the more intermediate stages of Excel at this point, which is good because if you go on in business or any other career, it's really nice to know these things. Anyhow, hopefully this was helpful. We'll see you next time.